Hi, my name is CareyHolzman and I'm the co-host of the free Tech Vets podcast at www.tech-vets.com. A link to that will be in the description below this video. What it is myself and Mike Smith, a friend of mine, who run a computer repair business. So between us, we've got over 50 years of experience. What we decided to do is put together a podcast that detailed out our experiences in what entails running a computer repair business, not just talking about what the latest puzzling fixes were that we had to deal with, but also dealing with things like contracts and customer issues and people who don't pay, etc., etc. And if that's of any interest to you, be sure to check it out. As I mentioned, links are in the show description. I've got a computer that was dropped off to me by a customer that said that it will no longer turn on. They had a power outage in their home, and ever since then the computer will not fire up correctly. Now, whether or not those two things are related, I don't know. I haven't done anything with the computer yet. Just set it here on the counter. I brought out a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse, my screwdriver, and of course a power cable to plug it in and verify the problem. I thought, let's just take out the camera and diagnose it and repair it, hopefully, live on the camera. So I'll walk you through my steps. The first thing we have to do, before I even turn it on, before I do anything, is I've got to open it up, see if there's anything obvious, see if I see, I don't know, anything burned, smell anything that smells burned. Again, I can't emphasize looking for something obvious. So there's no sense turning it on without first inspecting the inside of the case. And I can't work on it without, with the cover on it anyway, so the cover's got to come off. So this cover comes off pretty easily. It's got a lid like Darth Vader's helmet. Let's just set that down over here, and then we got these side panels that come off. Put that one next to it, and this one next to it. Now the first thing I see when I open this up is a bunch of dust. So before I even turn it on or do anything else, there's one thing I have to do first. Alright, so you can get a closer up look of this case and the dust. It's all over. And you know how we fix this, right? Now we can see from just the brief seconds that it took with that leaf blower how much cleaner everything is, including my focus is really on the fans. And always make sure you get the back of the computer, make sure you get the power supply fan. Alright, now we can begin our diagnosis. Maybe I need to start filming these things in 3D. What do you think? That'd be kind of cool, all that dust coming at you. Now, this is a system I actually built for this customer. I don't know, it's probably been about a year and a half, and all that dust built up in that short amount of time that you just saw me blow out of there. But we certainly don't want to get our hands in there and get them all dirty trying to diagnose it. It just takes a second to use the electric leaf blower, and you've seen my other videos where I use an electric leaf blower. Every system that comes in for repair for the last, I don't know, it's been about 8 years, I guess, I've been using that electric leaf blower, and it's never ever caused a problem. So for people who say that it causes the fans to spin too fast, it's just not true. Yeah, the fans do spin. The only reason you'd have a fan go out on you because of that is if the bearings in the fan were bad anyway, and that would just make you aware of it that much sooner. It's not going to cause the bearings to go out. Some people feel better putting a little toothpick like in the heatsink to keep the CPU fan from turning. Others claim that by turning the fan, more voltage, it creates voltage and it sends it down into the motherboard. We've measured it. It's such an insignificant amount of voltage, it's negligible. It doesn't make any difference. As I mentioned, every machine that comes in for repair goes through that. And I warranty all the work I do, and I've never had an issue. So do what you want. Alright, so let's verify that this does what the customer says it does. And what we'll do is I've got my keyboard here, which I'll turn this around and let's see what I'm doing. Let's see, we'll put it right about there, huh? I guess we could just turn it this way, I guess. So there's our keyboard right here. Plug in our mouse, it's just USB, so that'll go in any of the USB slots right there. Got a power cable and a video cable. And I'll save the power cable for last. This motherboard has built-in video. That just goes right there. And here's the power cord. Like so. Power switch on the back of the power supply is on. This is a really good power supply too. This is one of those Antec power supplies with the 80+ bronze certification. I don't see too many of those go bad, but it could happen. And let's see, if we just turn this thing, I want to give you an angle of what's going on. I guess this way you can see what's going on if we turn it on like this. Boy, I'm going to wrap myself up in cables by doing that. Let's get some of these cables out of the way. There we go. It's a little better. And let's see what that does. Look at that power switch here. Fans come on. This fan is on. CPU fan is on. Power supply fan is on. What about lights? What do we have on the front? The optical drive light is on. Power light is not on. That's interesting. And it's not a good sign. So I'm going to use the switch on the back of the power supply to shut it off. Clearly there's something really wrong. So the first place I'm going to start is with the power supply. And I'm just not going to put a lot of time and effort into changing the power supply out. Instead, I'm going to disconnect the power supply from the motherboard only, which is 2 connectors on the motherboard from the power supply. Let me go get a spare power supply, just plug it into the motherboard and see if it will do a power on self-test. I'm not worried if it'll boot just yet. I just want to see if the motherboard will post. So let me grab power supply, I'll be right back. Well, it just so happens I have a spare power supply that's exactly identical to the one that's in it. So let's use it, why not? Wouldn't really matter, just about any spare power supply would work for this. There are power supply testers out there you can buy, but I find that they're not very accurate because they don't put a load on the power supply. They just, power supply comes on and it's not doing any work. And sometimes when a power supply dies, it'll power on, and it's not until something tries to really draw a lot of power from it that it fails. And those power supply testers, at least the ones I see on eBay for $10 or $15, whatever they are, to me you'd be better off buying a $20 power supply and keeping it as a spare and swapping it out, and that would be your power supply tester, just as I'm doing here. Just want to give the board a good look over, just to see if anything looks obvious. I really don't see anything obviously wrong with it. It looks okay. Alright, so we're just going to pull the power connector here and we're going to plug it in right here. Flip the power switch on, and then come back around here and turn it back on and see what she wrote. I'm a little bothered by the fact that the power light doesn't come on, even though the CPU fan is turning. It's pretty interesting. almost reached for the wrong power supply. You know, when you're working with two power supplies, make sure you switch off the right one. The other thing I can look for when the system boots is you should see on the keyboard, you should see the 3 lights on the keyboard blink on and blink off when the system is initiating. So let's just try it one more time. I'm going to take a look at this keyboard and see if we get any. No, there's a power switch. There it is. See if we get that far with it. No, it would have happened by now. So this is a bigger problem than just a power supply. At this point, I can assume my power supply, or the customer's power supply, in this computer is probably okay. So now we're more than likely dealing with a motherboard, CPU, RAM. Not exactly sure. So I'm going to put this power supply, actually I think what I'll do next is I'm going to pull the motherboard out so we can work on it in an area that's not enclosed like this. It'll be easier to work on. I'll show you how I do that. First we'll start by just unplugging everything here. And we're done with this power supply, so I'm going to go ahead and put this power supply away. Let me just get this keyboard and mouse temporarily out of the way. And our power cord and video card, or video cord, we'll get that out of the way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip the motherboard down like this. I'm sorry, not the motherboard, the whole case. Got the case down like this, and I'm going to take out, what is there? There's an add-on USB card here that's got to come out. So we'll take out that add-on USB card. I'm going to unplug the floppy drive and the front USB ports and the front lights. It's all being unplugged. The SATA cable for the hard drive, the IDE cable for the DVD drive. And that looks like it. Now I can just take the screws out that hold the motherboard down. If you've seen my how to build a computer video, then you'll understand which screws I'm taking out right now. I'm sorry I can't get you a better camera angle of exactly what I'm doing in here. But suffice it to say, I'm simply just removing the screws that hold the motherboard in place so I can pull the board out. Alright, that's 6 screws. That should be everything that holds that board in. We've got a nice wire tie. All the wires are nicely wire tied, so that makes it real easy to get in here and work on the system. Remember I said you get that fancy wire management going on, and stuff like this can be a real pain when you've got to work around undoing all that wire management that you spent all that time doing to make it look pretty. Really need it to be clean, but not necessarily pretty, if that makes better sense. I should be able to just pull this board out now, and come on, a little tight in there with those cables. There it is. So I got the board out, and what I'm going to do is, this can be set aside right now. There's really nothing in here that, as far as I'm concerned right now, I have no reason to think that anything left in this case is bad. If the system doesn't at least post, it's probably not the optical drive or the hard drive, or we've already tested the power supply. There's going to be nothing special about the case. It's not like the computer would work in one case versus another case. A case is a case. So I'm just going to get this out of the way. we'll just put it right over here. Now in situations like this is when it's great to have one of these top deck tech stations from the folks over at High Speed PC. By the way, they're not paying me to tell you about it. I just really like it, and I'm going to show you why I like it. What I can do now is I've already got a spare power supply, a spare optical drive. There's even a spare hard drive right up here. You can see that. I'm not sure if you can see it. We've got a cooling fan here that's hooked right up to the power supply. And there's these great little rubber standoffs on the top here. This is all an anti-static, anti-conductive platform to work on the machine. And just put the motherboard right in its mounting hole here. And it's in there, and now what I can do is take the power supply, and now this will be the third power supply we've hooked up to it. But this will help us in our diagnostic. We plug that right in to the motherboard. And then we need the 4-pin connector to go on the board, which is right here. And all these connectors only go on one way. And make sure that the cables don't interfere with the fan, the CPU fan here. And then we've got our power switch, which I can see is going to go right. That should be our power switch. And then I've got to, let's plug some things back into it, just see what it'll do. Should do exactly the same thing at this point. We'll go ahead and plug our video in right here. You don't need to screw this down. Just testing. And USB mouse. Our keyboard, we're going to go right there with the keyboard, purple to purple. Video's hooked up, so we just need power. Notice how I always save power for last. That helps prevent accidents. So let's go ahead and put our, we'll make sure the switch is off on the power supply. Plug in the power. Now we'll flip the switch on, and I should be able to turn this on if I had it plugged in the right place, which apparently I do not. There we go. And what happens? Anything? Alright, so I don't know if the switch is going to work. I'm going to hold the power switch down just to see if the motherboard's getting a signal from the switch. Does not appear to be getting any signal from the switch. The board is not turning off. So I'm just going to use this power switch right here on the power supply, power it down. So I was correct in my earlier diagnosis that there was nothing in the case, like the optical drive, hard drive, or anything we had to worry about. Now that we've got this accessible, easily accessible out of the case, and we've eliminated all those other components in the case as being a cause of the problem. And this is just a process of elimination. We do have 2 RAM modules here. If one of the RAM modules is bad, it could cause this problem. So I'm going to pull one RAM module out, and I'm going to turn the machine back on to see if that makes any difference whatsoever. It doesn't. Make sure the power is completely off before you remove the remaining RAM module. And then I'm going to put the one I just took out back in, just to verify that that one module or the other isn't bad. Turn it back on. Still have nothing. One last thing I can do with the RAM is move it into the socket that the other RAM was in, just in case the socket was bad. So we'll move that into that socket. It probably won't make any difference, but I like to be thorough, and you just never know. Assume nothing until you try it. If it made sense, you would need to go through all these diagnostics. So you need to go through every possibility. Still nothing. and nothing. So the board is consistent, and that's a good thing when diagnosing. The worst kind of problems to diagnose are problems that only happen sometimes. And it doesn't matter if it's a problem with your car, or a problem with your health, or a problem with your computer. Intermittent problems are the toughest ones to diagnose. So in a way, the fact that this is demonstrating the exact same symptom repeatable over and over and over again speeds this diagnostic up 100%. At this point, I'm pretty sure the RAM is probably just fine and the RAM sockets are probably just fine. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with the board itself and the CPU. Now, one thing I can do on this board, just to be thorough, is to clear the BIOS. And one way you can do that, there's usually a little jumper on the board you can move, or you can simply just remove the battery, which I'll do here. There's a little watch-style battery. We'll take that out. Make sure our power supply is off. And there's usually a jumper somewhere you can move. I don't know if this is the jumper here. You move it temporarily to clear the BIOS. I'm going to move it back. You don't leave it there. You just move it there for a couple seconds. I don't see any other jumpers on this board. Looks like that's the only one. I would assume that's the BIOS. But either way, the BIOS will eventually clear in a few minutes. And then the other thing we can do is we can check the amount of power left on this battery, if this battery's any good or not. And I got a really cheap power tester from eBay. Let me show you what it looks like. So this is my cheapo Chinese power tester, call it a power tester, it's a battery tester from eBay. And I think it was like 10 bucks, and we can just put that in. And you can see that needle swings over to good. So the battery's fine. I don't know if you can see that. That swings over to good. And so, yeah, our battery is just fine. We'll put this away. All right, we can put our battery back in. Our BIOS should be clear. And turn the switch back on the power supply. Fire it up one more time, see if that makes it. It's kind of a last-ditch effort, last thing we can do, really. And there's nothing. Nothing's happening. So what's the problem? Well, the problem in this case is either the motherboard or the CPU. How do you know which one? Well, in more than 20 years of doing this, I've only seen about maybe a half dozen bad CPUs. Very rarely have I ever seen a bad CPU. I'd say more than 9 times out of 10, like 9.7 times out of 10, it's the motherboard that goes, not the CPU. So statistically speaking, and this is completely unscientific, this is totally based on my personal experience, my diagnostic is, this is a bad motherboard. Now, the only way to know for sure would be to get another motherboard that accepts this CPU. Now, we can easily remove the heatsink from the CPU here. And what's happened is that thermal compound is sort of like a glue. And it might help if this were warmed up a little bit to get this off of here. Oh, I think we got it. There it is. And I'm just going to set this aside. And you know what? I'm going to put this other RAM module back in because I'm pretty sure we don't have a RAM problem. And then we can pull the CPU out. Now this is an AMD Athlon 64X2 processor. It's looks like a 4500, something like that. No, you know what? I think this is an AMD X2. This is an AMD Athlon X2 64 5000 CPU, and this is the old socket AM2, I think. Could be socket 939. I have to check that out. So the way we would test this is we'd either have to get another CPU that fit that socket and plug it in, or we'd have to get another motherboard that would fit this CPU and plug this CPU into that motherboard. When the systems get older, finding the older motherboards or older CPUs gets more expensive because they don't make them anymore. So people on eBay and Amazon, they'll charge you $200 for a board like this that was $50 brand new because you can't get them anymore. Well, for $120, we can go buy a new CPU, a new motherboard, and new memory, and it'll all be faster and have a warranty. So in most cases, when you diagnose down to the CPU or the motherboard, you don't know which one it is. Unless the system's brand new and still under warranty, it doesn't really make much of a difference. You're probably going to have to replace both anyway. And when you do that, you're going to probably have to replace your RAM. And if you have an old AGP video card, you'll have to get a PCI Express video card, or get a motherboard built-in video, depending on how you use your system. By now you might be able to see why I like this TechStation so much. Here I was able to grab this CPU easily off of the motherboard without having to get my hand squeezed between the power supply and the top of the motherboard, and it's just so easy to work on it when it's all open like this. We didn't need to hook up any of the drives because, again, all we're trying to do is get it to turn on first. If it would have turned on, then we could hook up the drives. But even still, there's no point to hook up these drives. They're not the customer's drives. If I was going to build a new system, then I could use these drives to help configure that system before I put it into the computer case. So as you can see, this is really a useful tool for any technician to have, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of repairs like this. And as you can see, doing your own repairs can be costly. If you've got to turn around and swap out parts that you have to buy, it can get real expensive real quick. But if you're a technician, you're going to have these parts laying around anyway, and so that makes the diagnosis much, much faster. Sure, somebody could put it on an oscilloscope and measure power from here to there, and resistance and all this other stuff, but that takes more time. And when you're dealing with a motherboard that costs $60 brand new, it doesn't make any sense to pay $200 an hour to have an electrician try and repair it. It makes more sense to quickly diagnose it and replace the bad part. And that's the crux of all PC repair. And that's actually the most electronics repair today is so inexpensive to replace it versus the cost of labor. And I'm not saying that's an ecologically sound ideal, but it is an economical one. And so that's why we do it that way. So this can go back on, this being the heatsink and fan. Because I'm putting the same heatsink and fan back on, the same processor in the same direction, I don't have to worry about reapplying the thermal paste. And the other reason I'm not worried about reapplying thermal paste is the system doesn't work anyway. What I can do is I can go on Newegg and Amazon and look for another motherboard for this customer. I'm about 98% sure it's the motherboard that's gone. And how it went or why it went, I don't know. I'm looking at the board, but I don't see anything. Nothing standing out at me. Sometimes you'll see like a burn mark, or you might see a capacitor that's exploded. And some of these capacitors on the board do have bulging tops, but they're not really that bad. So something else has gone wrong with the board, and what it is I can't say, and it really isn't worth my time to do an autopsy on it. They're just too inexpensive to replace than to spend a lot of time on it, and I have other computers to repair. So the news for this customer is not good. It looks like we're going to have to either replace the board, or if we can't find a board, or if the board we find is $150 or more, we need to look at replacing the board, processor, and memory. And we'll replace it with another board that has built-in video to help keep the cost down. They're just using it for surfing the internet, doing email and stuff like that. And the built-in video is just fine for that. It's great for most offices and for a lot of home users, especially older home users. Not my generation, but my parents' generation, they don't game, they're not going to know the difference between a $500 video card and a video card built into a motherboard. So it's important for me to recommend what's right for the customer, not something that I would want, but something that's right for them. And in the economy the way it is today, everybody wants the cheapest they can spend, but at the same time, I've got to warranty it. So I can't just go get the cheapest thing. I don't like ECS motherboards. I'll tell you right now, I will not buy an ECS board. I've had a lot of bad luck with them. They're slower in performance than boards by other manufacturers, and I won't warranty them because they end up costing me money and labor. So that's my experience, that's my opinion, and I'll stick with Microstar or MSI, Gigabyte, Intel boards are always good, ASUS boards are good, I like 8-bit, I've used some Foxconn boards, and those are pretty much the only ones I'll stick with. That's where my experience is. I should say my experience is with a lot of other manufacturers. My experience with those manufacturers has proven that they make a reliable product. But like any product, they can go bad. And here's an example. I like MSI, but here's an MSI board that's gone bad. At the same time, this board's probably about 3 or 4 years old. So when I sold it to this customer about a year and a half ago, they bought it used. And at that point, it was probably 2 years old. So for what the customer paid, I think they can't really complain. It's an inconvenience, and yeah, it sucks, it happens. And now I've got to go online and see if I can find another socket AM2 board that's affordable, or put together a board, processor, memory, and give the customer a quote for what that's going to cost to replace. And that's where we're at on our diagnostic. Okay, so here's what I've done. I went on to Newegg's website, and funny enough, just like the video where I show you how to diagnose a dead system, this requires the same exact motherboard. So I went ahead and ordered another one of those boards. A couple days have passed. The UPS man just left, and I've got a box from Newegg that just arrived. And I'm a little concerned because this box seems smaller than I remember. So what I've done here, by the way, with regards to the set, I tried to recreate it exactly like it was a couple days ago. Everything is put back together on the motherboard, and motherboard still doesn't boot. That hasn't changed. Let's just move this temporarily out of the way. Let's unplug it from power. So we can open this box, this awfully small box, which I hope has our motherboard in it. I hope I'm not filming this for nothing. Okay, so here's our box packing material, so some advertising. I don't see, oh wait a minute. It's a tight fit. There's peanuts everywhere. There's our board right there. It's an ASRock N68C-S UCC motherboard. And again, this is the same board used in the other repair video that I just posted, what was it, a week ago? I was talking about motherboards. I like to use Gigabyte, MSI, Intel, 8-bit, ASUS. I left out ASRock. ASRock makes a good value-priced board, and if I've diagnosed this correctly, we should be able to take the RAM, processor, and heatsink off of this motherboard, which is not booting, put them onto this motherboard, and hopefully it'll fire up. So let's try it, right? What are we doing, wasting time? Let's get started. We have our new I/O shield, which if this works, we'll need that, because it won't line up with this board. I mean, this board even has an old parallel port for a printer, which most new boards don't have today. And this is a new motherboard, it's most certainly not a modern one. It's actually kind of lucky that a socket AM2 and AM2 Plus style board was even still available. So what we'll do here is just brand new, close-up of it. Here it is. Brand new, never been removed from its static bag. I even like that they didn't put a sticker on here, which is kind of cool. It keeps the bag less sticky for using again in the future. It's got this pink matte anti-static. I think that's anti-static. Might have to be another video for the future to find out what that is. But we're going to place it just there for right now, and we'll set this stuff aside. Now again, this is really where the TechStation shines, because now what I can do is go ahead and unplug this motherboard from its power supply here, which are those two connectors. I'm going to go ahead and remove this heat sink right here, and pull the power cable. We'll pull the CPU, and in this case I'm going to put the CPU with the pins down very gently because I don't want to get that thermal compound all over everything. We'll pop the RAM out, set that down like so, pull our power switch, and this, in theory, if I'm right, this is junk. So I'm going to set it over here. Now with our new motherboard, we'll bring that up and put it right on our tech bench. Right up there like so. And I can get this box out of the way now. And lift up our CPU retaining lever and place the CPU gently in its socket. Don't force it in. Make sure you've got it facing the right direction. And it should just fall right into place, and we can lower that retention bracket down. Because I just want to verify that this works, I'm going to go ahead and just leave all this thermal compound alone for right now, because the system's not going to be running for any more than a minute or two while we verify that this in fact works. And if it does work, then I'll go ahead and clean that thermal paste off and reapply it, as you've seen in my previous videos. And the CPU fan can go on this way, or I can turn it 180 degrees and put it on this way. I really don't know if there's any real difference other than how far this cable has to travel to power the CPU to the motherboard header, which happens to be right up here, right up in the front corner. So I'm gonna, I just plug that in, so that's gonna designate its, or decide its direction. Lower that lever down, and then we've got to put this bracket on. I'm sorry I couldn't get you another camera angle of that, but you've seen this in other videos where how that bracket goes on. This one went on easy peasy. We've got 4 memory sockets. See if I can turn this around this way, it might help a little bit. This motherboard has 4 memory sockets. 2 of them, the blue ones, are DDR3s, the 2 yellow ones are DDR2s. Because we're going to reuse the customer's old memory, assuming that it works fine, which I believe it does. That's DDR2 memory that's going to go into the yellow sockets. So there's one, there's the other. And all we have to do now is apply, put the power supply power on here. It's interesting they put a little sticker that says 424-pin connector. I'll show you that right there. Apparently when this board was brand new, when it was introduced, a lot of power supplies were still the 20-pin connector. And you'll see that on, maybe even on the power supply your computer has, where there's this separate connector that adds 4 more pins to the end. And all modern motherboards require that, that extra 4 pins, and that's just going to fit in one direction. And that's in, and then we need our separate 4-pin, the connector that only has the 4 pins on it. And that's going to go, again, only one direction, right here. Going to need a power switch to turn things on and off. I've got that power switch right here, and that looks like it goes right there. And let's turn this around again. I'm not going to plug in any optical drive or hard drive. That's not necessary. We really don't even need a mouse at this point. We just want to see that it turns on. So we're going to go ahead and plug in our keyboard, plug in video. Again, this motherboard has built-in video, as you see, just like the old board did. We need power for our power supply. Make sure the power supply switch is in the off position, like so. Now I can reach out over here, turn that power supply switch on. And when I hit this power button, I want to find out if my diagnosis was right or wrong. Remember, I diagnosed that the RAM and CPU were good and the motherboard was bad. And I explained that in my experience, when a system doesn't boot like that, and you've got all the other external components removed, so all you've got left is the motherboard, the processor, the RAM, and you've tried other power supplies, and the system turns on, but it doesn't do anything. In my experience, that's almost always the motherboard. So is my experience going to fail me? I mean, there are exceptions to every rule. Here we go. There it is. So it did boot up. That tells me the RAM worked and the processor works. My diagnosis was correct. Yay for me! Okay, turned it off. Now, again, this is really where this Tech Bench has just made doing this kind of work so much easier. Now that this is all set up and ready to rock and roll, I can go ahead and bring the customer's computer case back out, mount this back into the computer case, and plug everything back in, and everything should work. So I guess I should do that now, huh? Let's go ahead and start by unplugging some of these things. We get power off of here. Unplug the keyboard, the video cable. Unplug our power switch. Unplug the power supply. Here, here. And we'll just leave that right there for now. I'll just put it right over there. Here's our customer system. Remember, this had an add-in USB and FireWire card. I'm not going to put that back in until I've got everything back together and the system boots up. That'll be one of the last things I do, just to make sure that doesn't interfere with anything. We want to just go through this one step at a time. If you put everything back together all at once and it doesn't boot, you won't know where to start to find out what went wrong. So what we'll do first is put the motherboard in, hook up the power supply, we'll hook up the hard drive, the optical drive. I'm not even going to hook up the front USB ports. I will hook up the front switches, obviously, so I can turn it on and off, and verify that it comes on, and hopefully we'll boot into Windows. So we'll probably speed the video up at this point, so if everything looks like it's moving really quickly and your sound drops off, it's not you. You're doing okay. All right, let's get this done. Oh, getting a little ahead of myself. I'm going to go ahead and take out this I/O shield. So I just push that in. There's our old I/O shield. Let's go grab our new one. Here's our Here's our new I/O shield right here. Let's pop that in. Keyboards go up. Okay, now you can speed it up. Motherboard's in, hard drive's hooked up, optical drive's hooked up, even the floppy drive's hooked up. I gotta hook up the front port and umbilicals, and remember we left power, this is the same power supply, so we don't have to plug power in to anything else other than the motherboard, because we left everything else plugged in. So just plug the front switches up here. Alright, I've run into a little bit of a very minor problem, but one that does come up from time to time, and that is that our power LED for the front of the case is a 3-pin style, and a lot of motherboards will offer you either the 3-pin power LED connector or the 2-pin. This motherboard appears to only offer us a 2-pin, and we have a 3-pin connector, so we have to move the cables around on the connector so it'll fit this motherboard. And it's a great opportunity. I'm kind of glad it happened so I can show you how to do this. So we'll get some close-ups here, because this you're going to have to see close. One of the tools I use for this is from Harbor Freight Tools, and it's like a dental pick set. It's just exactly like what your dentist uses. Alright, so we can just pull this out, and you'll see it's got a little rubber tip on it to keep you from accidentally getting things poked. There it is. And I'm going to show you where this really comes in handy. These other ones work pretty well too, but I like this one for what we're about to do. I'll show you why. Alright, there's a close-up of the power LED cable right here. And you'll see it's got a 3-pin connector, but it's got to go right there on that little 2-pin connector. And we know that the outside, the pin facing, let's get that out of the way, the outermost pin is positive and the blue cable is positive. So we got to think about how we need to move these cables in this connector, because if we move the cables, for example, to the left side, I won't be able to plug this in, see, because the other connector gets in the way. So I have to consider that this has to go on this way, and we just need to move that black cable. No, the black cable's in the right position, right? Because that's negative. If we put that on right there, we need to move the blue cable, which is positive, to the center position. And here's how that works. With my trusty little dental tool from Harbor Freight Tools, we can dig under this. You could even use a jeweler's screwdriver. And I can push in on this blue cable to force it forward, and you'll see there's a little gap that's exposed right there. And I can get up under that gap and very gently lift this plastic. It's just a little plastic. It's very easy to break off. And we just want to lift it up. Like that. And while it's lifted, and takes a little practice, we want to pull that straight out, and without rotating it, move it over to the next connector, to the next position. And I usually push those back down with my thumbs and slide that back in, and now we can pull on it. It's locked in place. Now it's in the right position. Again, blue being positive, we know the outside of that connector is positive. and right there. If I did that right, that power LED on the front of the case should come on now when we turn it on. It's, you know, you can see it didn't take me very long to do that. The first time you do it, take your time, don't rush through it. The connector, the little plastic piece you saw me lift up is very delicate, it'll break off. If it breaks off, nothing really holds that cable into place. So if you have to do that, at least you know how if you want to. And now we can test fire this and see if Windows is going to start. So let's get my good old handy dandy Tech Bench out of the way. And so our keyboard and mouse. Let's go ahead and start plugging this stuff in here. Let's see, keyboard's going to go there. You know, I got to remember I'm filming this for you guys, so let's go ahead and plug these things in. There's our mouse, like so. We need to give it some power. Okay, well, it's always a debate which angle to show this to you at, because you could either see the components, the fans turn and everything, or the front LEDs. I think in this case, just because we did the whole LED thing, I want to make sure that that power light comes on, otherwise I wired it backwards. Of course, wiring it backwards won't hurt anything. Just, you know, it's delicate work. And one thing I've forgotten to do is plug the video cable, and I guess we're not going to go too far if I don't do that. Let me go ahead and plug the monitor in. Alright, monitor's plugged in, power switch on the power supply is on. Here we go. Well, we do have a power light here. That's good. I believe that's our power light. Our system, our BIOS screen just started up here. Start Windows normally. And now we get a stop 7B error. Now this happens because the hard drive controller on this motherboard is different than the hard drive controller on the other board. Or, one of the first things to try is if the BIOS was in IDE mode or AHCI mode. So I'm just going to go into the BIOS here and make a couple of changes very quickly. And let's see if it made any difference. It probably won't, because I didn't see anywhere for the AHCI mode to be enabled. And we're probably going to get that stop 7B error again. We'll start Windows normally. Yeah, there's our stop 7B. And again, that's just a hard drive controller error. And I'm actually glad this happened because I can show you how to get around that. As you can see right here, I've got my self-made Ultimate Boot CD for Windows disc. And I'll have a link to that in the video description below. You have to make this yourself. Maybe a topic for another video, but if you just follow the instructions on the website, it's not rocket science. Gonna put that in there. Of course, now I want to boot from DVD, or CD, but I've already changed the boot order. But there's usually a function key you can press right at the beginning to boot from, you know, to choose your boot device, which we can do instead of changing the BIOS. And it says right there, press F11 for boot menu. So on this motherboard, I hit F11 to hit my boot menu, and I can select my CD drive to be the one I want to boot from. And now it should start booting to that CD drive. There's our Ultimate Boot CD main screen. Network support is not yet started. Do you want to start network support? No. There's no reason to, and besides which, in my kitchen, I'm not going to run an Ethernet cable across the house to my router. It's going to go ahead and just finish what it needs to do here to make this desktop available. This is the Ultimate Boot CD desktop. So here we are, Ultimate Boot CD for Windows. I go to Start, and then Programs, and Registry Tools, and there's this wonderful tool I couldn't live without, and it's called Fix HDC, Fix the Hard Drive, the Hard Disk Controller. It tells you to first set the target root to C:\Windows. That's already been done here, but we can click that just to be safe. That's the correct folder. We'll go to Start, Programs, Registry Tools again, Fix HDC, Fix Hard Drive Controller. And it says, what do you want to do here? This is the hard drive. No, first back up the data yourself. This comes with no warranty. There's your target root, C:\Windows. Backup does not exist and will be created. So we're going to do M, which is Update Mass Storage Drivers, and press Enter. And as you can see, it's automatically detecting what the storage controller is, and then copying the appropriate files, and it says, Fix HDC is finished, good luck, press any key to continue. Press any key, we'll go to Start, Turn Off, and we're going to see here there's a Restart Eject option. We're going to select that, and it will properly restart the computer. First it ejects the disk, and if everything worked like it should, Windows XP should now boot correctly. There's our Start Windows normally again, that's what we want. Press Enter. Ooh, the tension, the anxiety. Is it going to work? Of course it's gonna work. Whose videos you think you're watching? Now that the system is booted, it's going to start detecting the motherboard's new Ethernet controller, sound controller, USB controller, controller this, controller that, the video card, the sound. All that's going to start being redetected. I'm not too worried about that right now, because the next phase in this will be to go into the control panel, go into Add Remove Programs, and start removing the old sound and video, and I'm trying to think what else might be in there, the Ethernet controller. Get all that stuff out before you install your new stuff, because it might be difficult to determine which one's the new one, which one's the old if you have two to pick from. So just go ahead and clear that stuff out first, and then you can use the disc that came with the motherboard driver disc, the motherboard driver CD that came with the motherboard, to install your drivers. If you want, you can go to the motherboard manufacturer's website and download newer drivers. However, that's really a process more for Windows XP than for Windows Vista or Windows 7, because they do a really good job in Vista and 7 of Windows updates providing those latest drivers. Still, it couldn't hurt to go there and get the latest if you want to. You don't have to. And one other thing, that Ultimate Boot CD is for Windows XP. I know it says for Windows, it's really for Windows XP. If you change your hard drive controller in Vista or 7, that's a different process, which I can explain another time. XP still has 2 years of life left in it, more than 2 years. Support ends in April of 2014. So there's really no rush for people who have XP to run out and get Windows 7 unless Windows 7 will let them do something they can't already do in Windows XP. I have yet to see anything Windows 7 can do that Windows XP can't, unless you go to the 64-bit version and you need that memory. But again, for most of my customers, the people that call me to do the work, these aren't computer gurus. These are folks, these are ordinary everyday folks that use their computer for email and paying bills online and booking travels online and things like that. So, you know, when people are well, like you watching these videos, these are people that want to learn how to do these things themselves, and they may go to those extremes of wanting the latest in technology and getting the latest drivers and this kind of thing. So it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just different attitudes. Some people like to have all the latest tech gadgets in their cars, and some people drive a car that's 12 years old. The only important thing is that the operating system is supported. Once the operating system stops being supported, then I can't condone its use anymore, because it'll become too much of a security risk. Every day that security risk will grow if it's connected to the internet. But just because Windows XP's been around 10 years doesn't mean it's inadequate. If you have a comment you want to leave that you can tell me Windows 7 can do something that Windows XP can't, and that's something a regular person would find useful, I'd be interested to read it. But in the meantime, customers are running XP. It's my job to support the XP. And as you could tell, I'm anticipating all of this. Why is he running XP? It's not mine, it's the customers. By the way, I do run XP. I like XP. And Windows 7 is fine too. I don't have anything wrong with 7. In fact, Vista, with all the latest patches, Vista's not half as bad. Vista's actually not as good as 7 still, but it's pretty close. So anyway, for what it's worth, that's the process now, is to go ahead and change those drivers out. And then I'm going to just do regular maintenance, which means scanning for malware, deleting temp files. I got to hook up the front port USB, the front port audio. I've got to plug this USB card back in, which should be no problem. That'll be done after drivers and everything have been done. Hit Windows Update, make sure Windows Update's installed, make sure the antivirus is updated and working, scan it for viruses, make sure it's clean. We'll do a defrag. I've said it before, I'll say it again, defragmenting doesn't really speed up your drive like they make you believe. That's not to say it should never be done, but once in a while, certainly not every day. And of course, Windows Vista, Windows 7, they defragment automatically in the background anyway. And of course, if you have a solid state drive, you never want to defragment that at all. Don't even get me started on this, because I'll be talking here for another hour about all the myths and misconceptions about defragmenting and how it was true when the technology was older, but not so much true today. So yeah, I'm already getting started, so I better stop now. All right. I hope you enjoyed it. That's your diagnosis and repair. You saw how the hard drive controller was updated so that we didn't have to reinstall Windows, and how the Tech Bench assisted in this diagnosis and setup of the new motherboard to get it into the customer's system. Motherboard was about $45. The customer gets away pretty cheap on this repair. They got lucky. It's certainly cheaper than buying a whole new computer and then having to move everything over. And then of course they would get the new operating system, Windows 7. They'd have to possibly replace programs, and even older hardware like scanners, all-in-one printers, that kind of thing may have to be replaced. That gets more expensive. And then the learning curve to just go back to checking emails and doing stuff online is a hassle that's gladly avoided, I can say, on behalf of the customer. So anyway, hope you found it helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.